Let me find you again. There we go. We are live. And this morning, I'm super excited to introduce you this really beautiful lady, Dr. Annetta Mallon, for yet another Upspiral Grief interview. Annetta and I actually met in the group, Loving Life After Loss. And by what you posted, Annetta, I just thought I have to connect to this lady because I absolutely love who you are and what you do. And I decided I have to bring you in front of the camera and introduce you to the audience here in Loving Life After Loss. And also just a little disclaimer that I really like to bring in every now and then to remind people. These interviews are actually recorded and will be shared on other platforms as well, because it's all about sharing the love and putting the word out there. Anything that is along the lines that will upspiral grief, I love sharing with the outside world on LinkedIn, various other platforms as well. So just be mindful. You can ask questions, you can comment. The comments will not be shared, but the interview will be. So without further ado, I would like for you to introduce yourself to the audience. Annetta, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we go into a bit more detail.
Absolutely. G'day, and thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
I recognise the traditional owners of the lands we are all gathered on here this morning and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm coming to you this morning from Tarkiner lands in the northwest of Tasmania. Oh, wow. So I do a lot of work in grief, and I've spent a good deal of my life working in grief because I started out as a somatic psychotherapist. So that's a body worker who encourages people to talk. And then after 16 years, my thumbs got really tired. So I moved over into more conventional mainstream psychotherapy. And now I do something called emotional freedom technique, EFT or tapping, which fast tracks. And people don't have to actually talk, ironically. So it's very fast, very effective. And I like that. There's a whole global movement around that. I also have I work with people doing a lot of public education talks. I have one on Thursday, for example, with a local group of older women who have regular meetings called the Chill Out group every week, and they want to know more about advanced planning. So I'm all about death literacy, building community, and I really, really, really appreciate the positivity and the safety of your group. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. That means so much to me that you say that, because it really, we had a bit, Annetta and I had a bit of a pre-chat before we went live, and we talk about how important this is in this group, to keep you guys safe and to really honor that you come into this space to be looked after. So I really love having you here today because you have so many interesting stories to tell. So we'll see how much we can fit into this 1 hour that we have together. Annetta, I know this is a little bit of a more confronting question, but I always like to start with one of those questions because it gives the audience a little bit of a background about who you are behind all this. This is your business and what you do, and we do want to talk a lot about that as well. But I also want to give the audience the opportunity to meet who you are and what your experience with loss actually is, for us to understand what actually made you go into these various directions in your business. So we're going to start with, you said to me that your earliest loss was at the age of 14. Do you want to share a little bit about the various losses that you had and what impact they had on your life?
Yeah, so little trigger warning. I had quite a violent upbringing, and I was also, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual assault. And it was the husband of one of my stepmother's sisters. It's a little bit convoluted. So it's not my immediate family, it's family by marriage.
Yeah.
But I quite liked the mother. She was a grandmother figure to me. I didn't have a grandmother here in Australia. And she had a really awful death. And when I say awful, I mean, it was protracted, it was painful, it was cancer. And many of us know just how devastating a cancer death can be. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it isn't. And I was in the room when she died. And the family had so many toxic secrets. It was agonizing to watch these daughters hovering almost like vultures over her, looking for some sort of last smile or last, which when someone's dying, it's very rare to get that lucidity right at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So she was very much within herself, and she finally did die. And two of the daughters were with her. The other showed up shortly afterwards and was just agonized because she'd missed it. And I was sitting sort of across the room watching this and thinking, it doesn't have to be like this. This is awful. I mean, I didn't like any of these women, these three, but I really felt for them because their agony was palpable, their distress and the pain of all that was unsaid. And it wasn't until years later, I'm an academic and I'm teaching health sociology and health science and doing more and more in aging.
See the questions if they come up. There you go. Sorry.
Yep, sure. That everything sort of came together, and I realized, oh, okay, this is death literacy we're talking about. We just need to share more. We need to remember that death is a natural part of life, and we also need to acknowledge that it's not build a bridge and get over it, mate, because we're in Australia and after 2 weeks your grief is done. It's about
adjusted pretty well, I have to say.
it's grief is something that's with us for life, and every time we experience a loss, it's a different grief because our relationship with that person is different, which is why it's a valid thing when celebrities die. You know, when David Bowie and Sir Terry Pratchett died, I was devastated because these creative people were such a part of my life. So it's different to when a friend or a family member dies.
I'm really glad that you point that out, because it hasn't got, you know, like in many grief groups, and that's what I'm always very, very big about in Loving Life After Loss. In many grief groups, there's often this competition that starts, who's got the worst grief and who's lost more people and whose is more recent and whose is more like who's deeper and more painful. And I don't want to have to focus on that. We are all here because we want to heal something and because we want to get to this point of the Loving Life After Loss, hence that title of the group, because I believe it's quite a pre-selector of who comes in and who wants that. And I always make quite a point about that. And I believe we have very little of that in my group. And I really love that because, as you said, every grief is so different and the relationship that we have with that person is so different. Yet it's not about comparing who's is worse, who's is deeper.
It's not about I'm griefier. I'm griefier than you. No, it's just it's there, and sometimes it bobs up to the surface. Sometimes it sinks down again. I'm from an island, so I use a lot of water metaphors. And grief for me really, you know, the way I experience it comes in waves. And sometimes those waves are really gentle, and sometimes they catch me off guard. Yeah,
I always compare grief with the ocean as well. I find there are so many similarities. It's really beautiful. Annetta, you shared a very touching story with me about a motorcyclist. Do you mind sharing that with us here? Because that's quite... I like the approach that came out of it. So I don't want to take that away.
I grew up with a family story, and I'll be honest with you, I don't even think that I was born when this happened. But where I'm from in North America, it snows for 3 months of the year. So if you're on a motorcycle, the roads can be treacherous. And we had a couple of acres of land, and we were on a highway, and there was a bend. And the story is there were two young men riding together. I think they were going home, and one of them who was riding in front made the turn. The second one didn't. So when it's snowing, if you were not familiar with snow, tire tracks can get covered up pretty quickly. Visibility can be quite low, and this the rider who missed the turn unfortunately broke his neck and died on our land, and we didn't, of course, find the body until spring, when decomposition sets in and you can smell death. I grew up with this as a family story, not as a hysterical thing, but just death is a natural part of life, and sometimes it's unexpected. But what bothered me is that nobody talked about the other rider. And they were young men, which means potentially that the writer who didn't die lived for a long time with stress, guilt. I hope he got a lot of help. I hope he came to terms with the understanding that it wasn't his fault. Accidents happen, but such a sudden loss is that's
and also
stayed
not
with me
being
my whole
able to
life.
find your friend. I think that must be the most devastating part.
Yeah.
Terry just commented me too, and I'm not really sure what you're referring to, Terry, but maybe you can explain and I'll get back to you.
So when a friend of mine recently, December, in fact, early December, a really, really good friend of mine died unexpectedly. I thought of that story, and I'm still processing my friend's unexpected death. I think it's this is one of the harder grief pathways for myself that I've navigated, but it's can't do anything about it. I just have to stop myself every time I want to post a funny meme on Facebook to him, you know, or call him up and say, hey, I just saw this, because we used to laugh a lot. So now I laugh.
I'm just saying, why stop yourself? Because I still post photos and funny memes on my husband's page. So, you know, I kind of like continue to do that because he's still, I know it's so funny, you know, some people say like, oh, he'll always be there, and other people like, you know, everybody's got different opinions on what happens to us after we pass, and I totally respect that everybody's got different faith as well. Yet I still love, in particular, because we've got two boys together, you know, I still love posting things like, you know, first day of high school and first day of leadership camp and all those things. I just love tagging him and all of that and posting it on his line.
And I think that's great, and I support that. It's because I don't know which family members are administrating that group, and because I have never met them, except for one brother, I don't know if that would be appropriate, and that's the only reason I'm not doing that.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Yeah. So with your background and your upbringing, you know, and your childhood and everything, what actually made you go into that field where you're in now? Like what was your journey in that in terms of career background? Tell us a little bit about that.
I started out as a somatic psychotherapist. I've always been interested in helping people, and not because I think I have all the answers, but I have a particular knack for people to tell me their stories. I'm a great story keeper. And I'm safe and I'm respectful, and I always have been. So I started out doing a combination of talking and body work, and then it became, okay, well, let's just work together to try and build as many tools and skills for people so they've got a collection of things in their own personal toolbox, so they're more resilient and they can make better informed choices. I think therapy is like funeral planning. Informed choices, you do better. So my thing has always been trying to put myself out of business with clients. I'm not one of those therapists that goes, oh, but you need me and you must stay, and this will take forever. No, as fast as possible, because you're busy. You have a life to get back to. So how can I best support you to do that? Absolutely. And it's always been, I'm very comfortable sitting with the unknown. I think it's because, genuinely, my birth father is a psychopath and played a lot of mind games. So a lot of stuff was unspoken. So the unspoken doesn't bother me. People will tell me as much as they're comfortable with, and that's okay. I don't need to know every detail. They shouldn't have to go through the horror of rehashing that. And it's very effective. It's actually psychologically, biochemically, neurochemically, it's much, much better. So then I'm always drawn to the stuff we don't talk about. Like, weirdly and interestingly, I think, I've always been a sex positive end of life worker, because intimacy and touch and sex and sexuality is so important. And this is also something we need to address in grief, because so many people feel guilty, like, but my partner died or my wife died, but I'm feeling attracted to someone else. Am I a bad person? No, you're human, and we're drawn to each other. That's actually healthy. I don't
love
like
that
it
you say that. It is such a huge point, and
it's huge.
it is really not talked about enough, really. And there is a lot of judgment in terms of, oh, you moved on too quickly, or
Oh,
how can
huge.
you
And it's nobody else's
possibly?
business.
And I'm like, how can you not? I've had these for so many years. And in particular, in particular, when you had a really beautiful and positive relationship, and I was very lucky that Rob and I had a very, very strong bond. So, the natural thing is like, how can you possibly, or how could you ever, that's the best thing I get, how could you ever find somebody after having been with Rob, somebody who's, I'm not thinking.
Velcro your wrist to your forehead.
Oh, hold on. Velcro wrist, no, that could hurt me. But it is really true, because I have, one of my most beautiful memories that I've shared a couple of times was when I stood on stage and spoke to those 500 plus people in a room and did the eulogy for Rob. And I literally, all I did was I shared everything about love and connection, because that's what Rob and I were about. So it was not the typical sort of eulogy that you would have expected. There was jokes in there. I started off with a joke, and I had people raising hands for stories about Rob and stuff like that. It was quite, it was so important to me that people would walk away appreciating what they have a lot more than before. And I thought, if Rob's passing can make any impact, then it should be that. It should be about love and connection, because that's what we were all about. And our last phone conversation was about that as well, about love and connection. And he told me about this beautiful young couple that he met and what an impact he left on their lives, and talk about love languages and all these things. I'm like, he would have made such a great coach. He always took everything that we talk about, or that I did in my work, and took it out to the world and raved about me. So I love that. And I think in particular, because we had such a strong connection, even more so, would you be longing for that when the other person passes, and we were very adamant about, if something was to happen to me or him, that the other person please moves on and has a happy life. We promise that to each other. And I think that's the only thing that you can do when you love somebody so dearly. You want them to be happy. And I know that Rob loves me wholeheartedly. So I know that he wants me to be happy. Yet there is this stigma from society that if you do move on too quickly, you either haven't grieved properly, or you're still in shock, or you're still in denial, or there are all these things that people come up with, great explanations to make their filter of what I do or what I have or what I say work with society's expectations. So everything I do has been created to interrupt that stigma of grief, because I don't believe in it. So I'm really, really glad that you bring that up, that whole intimacy, sexuality, new relationship that is really not talked about. It's frowned upon, it's frowned upon when you do move into that. And I don't understand why. It's not that I'm saying, my husband died and the next day he jumps in bed with somebody else. Well, even if that's what a person needs, I'm not going to judge her, but it's just, too much judgment, not enough healing. That's what I always say.
No, and I've checked. It's a 10 out of 10 stat. Everybody dies, and our lives are not that long. If you find loving support, whether the loving support for you is a really good friendship, or really good sex, or really good intellectual stimulus, or a combination of these things, open your arms and your heart and just say, thank you, that's wonderful. And yes, we might get our hearts broken again in a new and different way. That's part of the journey. And you express that so beautifully. Thank you for sharing that with me, because I actually hadn't heard that side of your story before. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, we haven't shared that many stories, really. Like, it was a connection, and then we reconnected for 10, 15 minutes before the interview. I'm like, let's do it. Let's do that in front of the camera. And I love that. I love when conversations come up without having any idea what your background is or mine. So that's absolutely beautiful. Annetta, so back to your career progression. So when you walked through the initial state and then decided, like, because EFT, for example, is just, oh God, I love it. It's just so simple. And I have to say, having two sons, they were 8 and 10 when Rob passed. I love every form of therapy where you don't have to delve into the emotions quite deeply, because that is the one thing, in particular for children, but also for everyone else. You know, why would you have to repeat your trauma over and over again by talking about it, by delving into it? If you want to, by all means, yes, please talk about it, because some people do need that, to delve in, to talk about it, talk it out, talk it through over and over again. And that's absolutely perfect as well. But in particular for children, I love when there are forms of therapy,
Yes.
like EFT, like EMDR, like all these things where you don't need to tap in and fall again, because they are so in this whole process of rebuilding themselves and finding out who they actually are after this. That I'll just laugh on that. Tell everyone a little bit about that, because not everybody knows about tapping. So do you mind sharing a little bit?
Not at all. Because I'd spent decades. Like, I started going to therapy when I was like 18 or 19, because, you know, horrible childhood. And I wanted to function better. Unfortunately, many of us, all too many of us. And sometimes things took a really long time. It was hard for me to find sometimes a therapist who wasn't intimidated by me, because I've got a strong personality and I'm really intellectual, and I'm also quite humorous, and I can be really stubborn. So I'm not necessarily the easiest client. And a really, really good friend of mine who is actually, she's at the top of her game. She is a PhD clinical supervising psychologist. And she's an incredible colleague and friend, and she got into tapping and used it in fact as part of her PhD. And she put me on to one of the leading researchers in the world. We're really fortunate. Peter Stapleton, so P-E-T-A, that's a female. Peter Stapleton at Bond University. The reason I'm giving her name here is she does a lot of tapping with children, and there's a lot of free resources on her website.
Beautiful.
So
if you don't mind, we can actually share that website later after the interview. You can put it in the comments.
Yes, happily. I'm child-free by choice. I don't really work with children, but Peter actually has 2 girls with her husband. So, there's a whole bunch of tapping resources, and also for children who are stressed, so tapping in the classroom. So I, back in the 90s, did a holistic health practitioner degree, acupressure, so the acupuncture points using fingers. I never did needles. And nutrition and EFT is an interesting intersection of energy psychology and the meridian system. So I never thought that something I did back, see, everything is sort of came together when I, at this point in time. So it's 8 points. Here, 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 here. Women have a great landmark, side of the torso where your bra strap is. And top of the head, and it's also using the safe point here, so it doesn't matter which side of the body you tap on. It is a little bit ableist. You do need fingers, but you can also tap on someone's body, so you could, for example, with a child, you could do that very gently. You don't need to tap hard. And the thing that I love about EFT, so I work a lot with PTSD. I've worked with military veterans and first responders. Now I work with people who sometimes had exposure to violent and unexpected death, or really deep-seated long-term grief. And you don't have to talk, which is wonderful. And it's fast. So the Department of Defense in the USA uses EFT for military vets because it's 94 to 96% effective.
It's amazing.
In turning the volume down on PTSD. Now, to give you an example of how effective this is, cognitive behavioral therapy, 12% doesn't work. So this end, I teach this to a client. Sometimes they only come to me once, because then they have that tool, that skill, and they can decide if they want to come back and work with me as a therapist or another therapist, or do it on their own. It's great. And there's lots of YouTube resources too. I only use evidence-based. I'm an evidence-based practitioner. So there's lots of different approaches, but I use the one that's had about 150 studies into it, and we know the process works. So I will share Peter's link, or if anybody wants to email me and has questions, I'm very happy to answer questions about that later.
Yeah. By the way, for everybody watching, and hi, welcome Kate, who has just joined. I also want to make sure that you all know, like every time when I'm done with an interview, when we finish an interview, my beautiful guests always have the opportunity to share their links and share their website, social media handles, whatever you would like, Annetta, whatever is the best way for people to connect with you, to have a bit of a background information about your services as well. I always ask my interviewees to share that underneath in the comments, so it's with the interview and you can find it quite easily. And so yeah. Anyway, we'll get back to you after that, and you'll have the opportunity to connect here as well. And Annetta is also in a group, so obviously I will tag her in this interview as well. So if you have any questions, you can tag her. It's funny, I so assume nowadays that everybody knows how that works, but I will mention it quickly because somebody asked me, how can I actually tag? Use the @ symbol and then type the name and it comes up and you click on that. So it's really, really simple because, you know, not everybody knows how to do that. So I thought I'd mention it here as well. If you have questions, please tag myself or Annetta and we can get back to you on that. So EFT, what other services do you offer nowadays? What's your favorite? That's what I would like to know. What's your favorite way of working with people? It will obviously depend on the client, but what lights you up the most when you do that?
What a really good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I listen. I love listening to people because one of the biggest problems I find as a practitioner with services outside of therapy, so I get all sorts of perspectives, is that nobody's listening. People we all want to be heard. We all want to feel that we're seen, because that's a validation. And when we are in some of the worst pain we'll ever experience, which, let's face it, that's what grief feels like. At least that's what it feels like to me. We don't want, grief is really isolating, and it's a terrible thing to feel that we are absolutely all alone. And listening, and it took me a long time to listen without speaking. A very good friend of mine helped me. She does a lot of compassionate listening and nonviolent communication. And being able to sit quietly and not make a sound and just accept, that's been incredibly valuable. I love using the EFT, and I love also something else that's one of my favorites, because I can never just pick one, is making room for laughter. People, usually and generally, there's joy in the relationship we had with the person who's died. And it's kind of dumb to just be like, oh, can't laugh. Oh, bad laugh. No, like we sit and giggle. Sometimes I'm laughing with people so much we're crying. It's which in itself is a lovely sort of cathartic process, and normalizing grief, and also again positive effect on neurochemistry, because when we cry, it actually changes our brain chemistry, which you probably knew. So and so laughter has as much of a place, as much right to be at the grief table as tears or numbness or anger or anything else that someone might be experiencing. And I love being witness to that and helping people realize all of this is valid. Whatever you're feeling is valid, and your pace is your own. So people begin to realize, oh, this is mine. It's not about what it looks like on Instagram or what I think it should look like to other people, because we're so aware of being looked at How is it going to look? Especially women. You know, we get that from before birth. No, it's fine. It's your thing. You can own it. And it might change several times a day. Own that. It's fine. I mean, please don't be a danger to yourself or other people around you. But it's fine. And laugh as much as you need to.
I have to share the funniest thing with you, and it came so unexpected at a relatively early stage in my grief. I hadn't even reached a 1-year mark yet, and it happened at a photo shoot. And I did a photo shoot for Loving Love After Loss, and I have to admit the first photo shoot I did was extremely stressful. I felt so stressed. I felt so pushed. I did not enjoy the experience, and the photographer was quite bossy, and and my boys, because they were there with me, because we shot a video as well that is on my website. So the video is still there and everybody loves it. However, for me, unfortunately, it's still that negative memory of the day, of the pressure, of the, you know, so I kind of haven't quite reframed that from myself yet, because my boys still refer to that day and to that photographer with honey, honey, honey. That's what she did the whole day. Honey, 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 honey. And I'm like, can you just please stop calling me honey? I do not like it when people call me honey, unless they're an intimate partner of mine. That might be different. I know it's an Australian thing. However, it was quite stressful. And the reason I'm sharing this is because I had 4 people actually that I invited to come along to the photo shoot. 2 were people that I literally met on Facebook, and I put a shout out there. I need somebody to be in the shot for 10 minutes for that day. Can somebody help me out with this? Because she didn't have anybody available. I thought that would have been her part. Anyway, so these women come along, 2 women and 2 of my friends. I had never met these 2 women before. We had arranged to meet at a cafe, and we were almost an hour late. I was so embarrassed. I felt so stressed. I told her these people are waiting, but she's like, no, adamant, we have to move these shots in before, We finally get there, and I'm sitting down with these women at the cafe table and trying to explain. I was like, look, I just want to give you a bit of a background about this photo shoot. I'm so sorry that, you know, we kept you waiting. So basically, about 9 months ago, I lost my husband, and she looked at me and goes like, have you found him yet? And I was so perplexed in that moment that I wasn't sure whether that was highly inappropriate or hilariously funny. And I just stopped in my tracks, and it was so good because she literally finally broke that stress factor in me. And I just looked at her and she's like, I'm so sorry, it's just, you know, occupational hazard, because I'm a funeral director and I like to make people laugh. And I'm like, oh my God, I just could not believe it. She was a funeral director and she came to the photo shoot because she heard about my background and she wanted to help me. And she made
wonderful
this that I, in the first instance, thought was highly inappropriate. And then I realized how hilarious it actually was for me to be asked that, you know, in my full-on stressful situation. And I thought, okay, that's a good one. And I never forgot that. Like, just that moment, not even that the question I felt was so inappropriate in the moment, but it actually completely changed my state, and it completely got me out of this stress, push thinking, you know. And yeah, it was hilarious. We actually stayed in touch for quite a while after that, and it really made my day, I have to say, because it was so stressful. So yeah, I have never asked anybody the question because I thought maybe yeah. But I love when
my version is when someone says I lost someone, because I don't like euphemisms. Euphemisms actually promote that sort of chrysalis. That So did you check the fridge? Because you haven't lost them. You know exactly where they are. They're in the ground over there, or they're in an urn over there. They're dead. So big ups to that funeral director. That's and I'm also really glad that you were able to laugh. Like, I wouldn't say that to someone who was in really raw, fresh. Like, I don't
know me, so it was really quite courageous of her to do that, and I loved it. I loved her for it, seriously.
And I'm glad you got what you want on such a horrible day. But now too, I have to tell you, I want to put you in my phone so I can use an ABBA song as your ringtone. Honey, honey.
Oh my God, yes. Terry is just commenting on you, Annetta. She says, amazing. Your words are resonating on a deep level today. And she's just laughing. That's really good. I'm so glad, Terry. She's always one of our frequent watchers, very, very active in this group.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Oh, I love it. I love that you brought up the topic of humor, because I feel that we need a lot more of that. And I've found that quite challenging at first after Rob passed, to get back to this stage of laughter and lightness and singing. And, you know, because I'm a person, I sing a lot. Somebody says something that's a tune, and I instantly have to sing that tune. And it happens all day, every day. My boys are very used to it. And I feel this is the one thing that I focus on a lot in the healing journeys, in my programs, to get people into this whole, try it out, give it a go, you know, focus on one thing that's positive today, or like these little steps. And I think the reframing and changing perspectives is a really, really huge factor of healing, and allowing that in is just very beautiful.
Yeah. I think too, if you have children in your life, that is a pathway, because children are this is a generalization, of course, but children are generally far more resilient, and children are actually quite germane about death. They're quite pragmatic. Okay. Yeah. And yes, it needs to be age appropriate, but for kids, you know, because they're so busy learning and doing and growing, and they're, you know, very much in the moment. So humor and laughter is going to naturally happen when it happens. So that's a really nice way to try and be in the moment with your kids can be really, really healing and really important. I do that with my pets. So I've got a wonderful dog named Cully, who it was his birthday yesterday. He turned 11.
Oh, happy birthday.
And so, you know, sometimes just the looks he gives me, or the way that he plays, and we'll roll around together laughing. And that so it might be happiness, it might be joy, it might be just a very calm bliss, it might be just a feeling of love. Whether you get that with, you know, an adult, a child, a pet, a place or space. I know a wonderful actually, she's an EFT and trauma practitioner, and she loves plants. So her office is full of plants, because houseplants are her happy place. And it's so essential that we're aware, we have permission to do that. It doesn't have to be the grim, somber, nothing's ever good again for the rest of your life. I mean, for some people that's what they enjoy, and that's okay. I'm not personally that kind of person, and I don't encourage that. I don't personally think that's very healthy. Yeah.
I also hear, like, the term that I hear a lot is, my life will never be the same. Well, of course not.
Well, yeah.
It doesn't mean that it has to be negative or sad for the rest of your life, or, you know, you have the right to grieve, you have the right to cry, but just as much, you have the right to move forward and to laugh and to enjoy life and to allow love back in and to do something that you actually love. And that is something that I find so powerful when people get past this hurt stage and past this initial really intense phase where they feel like their life is over and it's, you know, that's it. When they move past that, when they get into this healing pathway that I call it, that I really love, and then realize the opportunity that lays within this, you know, and I call these the hidden gifts in adversity, when you realize how much opportunity there actually lays and how much choice there is. I had one friend of mine, bless her, she told me that a piece that I have rewritten about widowhood, I'm not sure, I'm actually going to point it out to you because I think you would really, really love that. There was a piece shared about widowhood that really touched me, and I thought, yes, I get that, yes, I get that, yes, I get that. But it was quite a long poem, and every single paragraph in my head, I reframed it instantly, because that's what I do. That's what I do ongoing. I can't help but. I had the loving life after lost filter on, and I rewrote. So I sat down and rewrote the whole poem, and I found it quite confronting to share because I wasn't sure how people would take that. But then I thought, well, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to interrupt the stigma of grief. So I shared it. And this beautiful friend of mine told me that her mom has read it, and so her dad, so her mom's partner, only just passed, and she said that has changed so much for her. And she went out and redecorated. I'm having goosebumps when I'm saying that. Redecorated the Christmas tree because she had always done it the way he wanted, and then all of a sudden she realized, but I never liked it like that. And I thought, yeah, exactly. I love this so much, and I thought, how beautiful is it that even if it's just something simple like decorating the Christmas tree in one color because I like it color coordinated, go for it. Go nuts. It's awesome. Do it all red if you like red. You know, that's perfect. And she said her husband always wanted all the colors on it and everything, and go to town and put as much as you can on the Christmas tree. And she's like, no, I like it, you know, very stylish and one color. And I'm like, oh my God, something so little can be so beautiful and so freeing.
And yet so profound.
Yeah.
Remember,
because
you know,
I feel it's like
we're intensely,
too.
we're intensely visual creatures. So
Yeah.
80% of all the information our brains process any given day comes in through our eyes.
Yeah.
So the Christmas tree is really, yes, it's
so
small in the grand scale of things, but it's so important. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that you've got this poem, this resource to share around with people, so they're not tempted to fall into that really awful trap of sort of, you know, when you'd said, my life will never be the same again. That doesn't mean your life gets stuck in a suitcase and frozen in resin, and then that's it. And you just got your suitcase for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And
that's what a lot of people do. They stay frozen in that moment of the loss. I still struggle to find a better word for that. I always refer to it as Rob's passing, but and the whole group is called Loving Life After Loss. But through my whole work and what I'm doing and sort of group and what I have learned about everything is, to me, loss is not the perfect word. I still decided to keep the name of it because that's what people understand straight away.
Yeah.
However, loss is not the right word for me. I always speak about Rob's passing because to me that was exactly what happened. He passed over, and that to me is a beautiful term that I can really live with. I don't agree with I don't like the negativity of the word loss because I don't see it as such. You know, I know that is very confronting for a lot of people to hear. Yet for me, that was like Rob and I had a soul contract, you know, and his passing was the end of that contract. And it's just the way that I see it, and that is with no disrespect whatsoever, and definitely not with a lack of love. You know, there's just the point for me, the most beautiful point of transformation for me was when I realized that even his passing was an act of love for me, and that was so beautiful. That really changed everything for me, and that is what I would love for everyone to realize. You know, when they go through this journey, when they come to this point of, wow, here are my hidden gifts in that adversity, and then they are allowed to uncover them and unwrap them and enjoy them.
I think what I'm hearing, and I'm really liking the way you've got particular terms for things, like the system of thinking that you've got makes a lot of sense to me. It's beautifully articulated. I'm really enjoying our conversation. Thank you. But what I think I'm hearing is and I agree with you on this, is that loss implies that we are then somehow incomplete. That, you know, like if I take an earring off and like that's a death, then I've lost, and now I only have one earring. But in fact, what happens is you're complete. You go on a little bit differently, and of course now I'm on camera, and it's going to be weird trying to put my earring back in. There we go. But the gifts, the transformation move in to fill that space, and the space might change shape, or it might be a different color, or it might perform differently, but you are not lesser. We are not lesser for that. Loss changes, but it does not diminish definitively. And I think that's so important. One of the things I really appreciate most about your group is that it's okay to recognize that we experience grief, we experience loss, we experience sorrow, we experience regret, whatever it is that the absence after the afters of a death for us, however they are. But that's not it. Other things happen, and we do, like it or not, we grow. We come to realizations. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we keep fighting the realizations. But that's a way of filling that absence too. So the loss itself is not the thing that defines us.
Yeah, exactly. It's what we do with it. It's how we respond to it. Because so many people, because I'm always very big about choices, and choices, the concept of two choices was actually something that my late husband taught me way before I got into the world of self-development. He always said that to me. He's like, you know, you've got two choices. How you if you focus on a positive or negative, like really as simple as. And then people always come back with this, but I didn't choose to lose my husband or my child or my father or whoever that these people have lost. I really don't like the term. Now I get hung up on it. But anyway,
it's okay. Just look in the fridge. You'll be fine.
Exactly. Or in the freezer. No, sorry. That's really bad.
We talked about that, not in front of other people.
Whoops. Am I live on camera? So I think, you know, I always say to them, your choices and how you respond to it. It's not that you choose for that person to pass, but you choose how you respond to it. And you also choose what you allow into your life. If you allow the positive influence, that's my dog saying hello. How dare another dog walk past our balcony?
So rude. So rude.
No. It's not about how, you know, how, I'm fully distracted now, thank you. The whole idea is to choose how we respond, what we allow back into your life. And so many people feel, I am not allowed joy anymore. I'm not allowed to be happy now because, you know, my husband passed. So, and I'm like, but why? I don't understand why on earth we feel so guilty when we laugh, when we joke, when we love, when we are happy. I don't understand this. I really don't, because it's something that society has put upon us. That's something that society expects from us. And I don't understand why, because it's unhealthy. We have already had to deal with so much anyway. Why add such negative expectations to the pile when there is so much opportunity for healing, for joy, for learning, for growth? You know, it's just unbelievable. Like, it way outweighs everything once we allow that to come in. And that to me is the most amazing part, you know, when once we get past this point of everything's bad, nothing's ever going to be the same. And like, no, well, of course it's not going to be the same. You know, change is the only constant in our lives, really. Just
absolutely.
The way it is. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
I love this. I think we have to repeat that at some stage for sure.
Anytime, happy to.
We have a couple of minutes left. So what I would like to do is, Annetta is in the group. So if there are any questions, any whatsoever, please post them in the comments below. Please feel free to reach out. Annetta will share her links, her website, social media handles, whatever you would like to share. I always recommend sharing them in separate comments, all the links, because then they pop up as previews and people can actually see.
Okay, would you like me to start putting those in now?
Oh, no, you can do it when we're done with the interview. That's absolutely fine. You can go back in the group, and because it's live streamed into the group anyway, so it just shows up there. And then also every time when we're done with the interview, I download it, upload it to YouTube, and put the YouTube link underneath, because so many times people have asked me, how can I share this outside the group? My sister, my friend, my such and such has to see this interview. I want her to come in the group, but she's not ready. So I'm always happy to put that on the YouTube channel, and that way everybody can share it. You feel free to share it. You don't have to. It's up to you. And I just love.
Oh no, I share around on all my socials.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's. I'm really particularly pleased we're doing this on a #Gratis Tuesday.
Yay.
because
Woo.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity
Yeah.
to get to know you a little bit better, and to
Thank you, likewise.
actually put my perspective out in front of your group members, because it is so positive. And so often when I'm speaking, it's people are going, yes, but what about, and the dreaded yes, but.
Yeah.
And there's no yes, but here. It's great.
Yes, and.
And the more we share, and the more we network, and the more we connect, the better everyone's death literacy, the stronger our community becomes.
I love that. What do you want to leave our audience with, one or two highlights that you would really like for them to hear right now? Anything that comes to mind? No pressure.
Healthy self-care is not selfish.
Yes.
Healthy self-care is not selfish. So I can very easily slide into being a workaholic. So since we and lots of, we're in
when you love what you do.
Yeah. Oh no, really passionate about it. But we're also in a culture, in a society that emphasizes that you have to be a human doing, not a human being. And none of us, as we all know very well, none of us can actually be there for friends, for family, for clients, for work, for whatever, if we're not full ourselves. So I've fallen back in love with naps. And I've fallen back in love with, I moved recently. So I moved from the mainland of Australia on the New South Wales Central Coast down to Tasmania. And part of the a big part of the move was, let's have a better work-life balance and let's take better care of ourselves. So I'm taking lunch breaks, and maybe I'll sit and watch like a half-hour sitcom, and I'll do some knitting, and I eat and I drink water. But I also, if I'm tired, I go and take a nap.
Wow.
So whatever your healthy self-care looks like, is it taking a bath? Is it sitting down on the floor with your kids and reading a book? Is it going for a walk in first thing in the morning? I know somebody who gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and she goes for a walk. If she had a dog, she would take the dog, but she takes herself. So whatever it is, or is it getting together twice a week on Zoom with your girlfriends around the world and having a cup of tea and a glass of wine? Is it taking silence for yourself? So there's a beautiful little secret bit at the back of your yard, and or on your balcony, and you just go and you sit there and you listen to your water feature, or you smell your plants, and you get a little bit of sun on your skin safely, don't burn. Whatever it is that you need to take care of yourself. We all need rewards, and you are worth it. We are worth it. Healthy self-care is not selfish.
I absolutely love that. I also picked out one favorite, actually, that you said very early on in the conversation about your dad being a psychopath, if I remember that correctly. And I also believe when you talk about the listening, I really, really love that you pointed that out, because so many of us listen with the intent to respond rather than to understand, And I love when we talk about hidden gifts in adversity, when you think about your upbringing, that has probably made you one of the best listeners, because you have learned how to read body language and how to read between the lines and understand that. I love it. It's another dog walking past, more you. I have to keep her inside, I think, next time I do an interview, because it's really disruptive.
Yeah, and we're only here to look at the dogs and the cats and the rabbits anyway.
Yeah, exactly. My cat just came past. I wanted to drink on my water. I wanted to highlight that because I really love that you said that. The listening part is so important, and often, in particular, when it comes to grief, people feel the need to say something. And very
make
often
themselves feel better.
Another story about their grief or somebody that has had grief, and it's not helping. Somebody
what it's doing, it's a weasel thing, and Brene Brown has a lovely little video about this. I'm sure many of you have seen it, but it's that weasel thing of, I'm not comfortable, stop. So one of the first things I teach my students is, like, if someone's, don't touch them.
Yeah.
Listen and don't touch, because that's an interruption, because you're feeling, or I'm feeling uncomfortable. You just sit with the discomfort, you put it in the for later basket, you think about it later, but in that moment, allow everyone their process, allow people their space and their honor that story. Flipping it and making the narrative about us is incredibly selfish, and it's mean, and it actually stifles and distorts grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
And thank you.
Do you have that video somewhere? You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Do you have that video?
Yes, I do. And I will share that link with you.
I would love for you to share that. Actually share that as a fresh post, maybe in the group.
Yes.
We have this beautiful hashtag up spiral, and I love it. So anything that's positive, you can always use the beautiful hashtag up spiral. All of you watching this right now, same thing. I love it because I always tell people when they come into the group, when they feel completely down and don't know where to start, type in the hashtag up spiral and you feel all these beautiful posts coming up that will help you along the way. So
what a great resource. That's a great resource. Fantastic.
And again, Annetta, I just really want to say thank you so much for the time we had together today. I'm absolutely certain that we will do this together again. And it is so lovely to meet you right here in front of camera and in front of everyone. And yeah, please do share how people can contact you. That would be really beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. And anybody else, any questions, please post them below. Awesome. Thank you very much. Bye for now.